This is a class guide for Lords of the Fallen. I'm going to help you understand the difference between the classes in this game, why you should pick one versus the other, and help you have a better idea of which one might be better for you. The first thing you need to know is that this works almost exactly like Dark Souls and Elden Ring. So whatever class you pick is not actually going to be super important long term. It really only determines your base stats and level and like your first stat distribution and also some starting gear. And that's pretty much all that you get from classes. You can start as a knight and then you can later skill into Radiance and become like a holy paladin or something, or a complete magic user. Like, this does not determine anything long term, so keep that in mind. This is just for starting the game and to get you started on the right foot. That's what classes are in a game like this. Now, the classes that we have are Hallowed Knight, Udurang Warwolf, Partisan, Mournstead Infantry, Blackfeather Ranger, Exiled Stalker, Orient Preacher, Pirate Cultist. So I'm going to go over each one of these in details, but the TLDR version is Hallowed Knight is just a pretty standard, sword and shield knight, basic, most generic playthrough of a Dark Souls game ever, or not that it's Dark Souls, but Souls-like game. And then the Aldinger or whatever Warwolf is basically Barbarian. It's like a two-handed melee class, but still just, generic melee class. And then we got the Partisan, which is kind of a more balanced one. They start with a crossbow, a mace. They're kind of like a hybrid in between. They have more balanced stats. Then the Mournstead Infantry, noob-friendly because they start with a spear. So they're more balanced, a little bit lean towards agility, and then they start with a spear and a shield, which is really nice for new players. And then the Blackfeather Ranger is about what you'd imagine as a ranger. They have a bow. They also have a hatchet and a shield. Their main focus is arrows, but ammunition's kind of annoying to keep up with in this game, so you're still going to rely on melee a lot, so keep that in mind if you pick a ranger. You're not going to only use the bow. That's not how it works in this game, unfortunately. And then the Exiled Stalker. This one is the dual-wielding dagger, all agility class. This one's really, really fun, but also takes a lot of skill to actually get value with. As far as starting. Later on, right, you can take the daggers off and put on a giant two-handed mace if you wanted to. I mean, you change that later. But for starting, has a lot of finesse, is a lot of fun. The Orient Preacher, this one starts with an insane amount of Radiance, and this is basically your holy class. It'll later on get spells to enhance its like melee weapons with holy damage. You'll do spells that, do holy damage, potentially buff spells, things like that. And then the Pirate Cultist is what you'd expect. It's the Inferno version, so there's a stat called Inferno, which is basically just fire. And it's going to learn all the fire spells and stuff like that. I mean, again, it's not stuck to it at all. You could level up Radiance with this and learn holy ones instead. But for starting off, start you off on the right foot to be a fire mage if that's the way you want to go. And then the Condemned is the throwaway class from all the Souls-like ones where you start off at level 1 instead of starting at level 10 or 11 or 9. Like all these other classes start like level up like about around 10 levels or so. It varies for each class. This one starts at level 1, starts with Rusty Buckets, which are basically case-this weapons, like fist weapons, and starts with 9 of every stat, which is actually a great class. And the reason the Condemned's actually so great is because you can build it any way you want. It starts at level 1, so those first 10 levels, you can distribute those however you want. So you could just go all endurance, all vitality if you want. So it really makes it a little bit better to build whichever way you want. But if you're really new to Souls-like games, then you don't want to start with this just because getting through the tutorial areas will be really, really hard for you with it. So now to go into these in just a little bit more detail. So the Hallowed Knight, he starts with a one-handed sword, starts with a shield, and he has like a medium to heavy set of armor. And it's really going to be good if you are kind of not super good at Souls-like games or don't have a lot of experience with them, just because, at least for getting through the beginning. Again, you can build it out any way you want later on, but just for the early game, it's like, it definitely takes a little bit more skill than using the spear class, but it's really good for just like being a little bit tankier. You have a shield that blocks a little bit more damage and stuff, so you can get away a little bit more with just blocking and taking a little bit less damage that way. And it's just a really good like learning class for a Souls-like game. Very standard, very easy to understand. So if you're really new and don't want anything complicated, Hallowed Knight is really, really simple. Then the Warwolf class. Now, this one is also going to be really, really simple, although it might take a little bit more game skill and a little bit more knowledge than the Knight, just because using a two-handed weapon, it actually will be easier overall, but also it takes a little bit more skill to then dodge, correctly, since blocking is not going to absorb as much damage and stuff. But it's blocking with the starter shield versus blocking with the weapon is not that big of a difference anyway. But this one starts off like medium weight or so, and it also has throwing axes or hatchets or whatever, and those are pretty cool. They do some decent damage, but again, ammunition's not great in this game. You got to use ammunition pouches and stuff. but at least it has some options. Strong two-handed class is meant for strength build, so if you want to go all strength basically and high endurance, that's the class you'd want to start with. And then after that, you have the partisan, and this is a more all-arounder class just to get you started any which way you want to go. So if you don't know what you want to play, then partisan might be a good one. If you know that you don't want to do magic, so you don't want to do magic, but you don't know what way you want to go, you don't know what type of weapon you want to use, you don't know if you want to go agility, if you don't know what you want to go strength, you don't know yet, then partisan's actually really good for that because they're evenly spread and they start with a mace and a crossbow. You get a feel for, like, okay, melee, how it would feel. You get an idea of what it'd be like to try to use ranged a lot. And they start with, like, you know, medium to heavy armor, so, like, you're kind of tanky-ish. You're tanky enough, better than condemned at least. So, you know, it's a good starting point if you don't know where you want to go or what way you want to level up yet in this game. So you can do this one, feel it out, and then when you get some levels, build it out any way that you want to build it. Change out your weapons to whatever you want to build. Then the Mornstead Infantry. Now, this one is hands down the best class if you are really new and, you know, basically bad at Souls games. Not, you know, no offense to it, but, like, you know, if you don't play before, you're dying a lot, stuff like that in these types of games. It's so good in the beginning just because you start with a spear, and the spear has so much range and does a lot of good damage that you can just kind of poke at enemies from far away for a lot of the enemies. Now, a lot of enemies will close the gap on you in this game really well, but it still gives you it makes it much easier to react to and dodge enemies and stay away from them while doing damage. They also start with javelins that you can throw, which do a ton of damage, so that's also a good, like, ace in the hole if you're in trouble and don't want to close the gap on, like, the last enemy, or you know, there's a few enemies left, or, you know, before you get to a place where you can heal or something. It's a good one for a new player. They start with medium to heavy armor, and it's just really a good class, you know, strong, survivable, just, I don't know, really good for noobs. That's it. It's really, really good noob class. And then the Black Feather Ranger. Now, this one gets you started on the right foot for using range stuff and being a little bit more towards agility. But again, it's kind of the exact same thing as the partisan, except you expect a little bit more towards agility. And it starts you with a bow, which is really fun in the beginning. The bow is really good in the beginning as far as it has a lot of ammo. And, you know, if you get a few ammunition pouches, you can do pretty good. But don't expect to lean on the bow, because, like, you might have an area later on, like a little bit later in the game, where it's like, okay, to get from one rest point to the next rest point, if you're gonna kill every enemy on the way, then you would have to probably shoot like 100 arrows, which would, I don't know how many ammunition pouches that would be, like 30 ammunition pouches. It's not realistic. You have to melee in this game. It's not like Elden Ring where you could craft 99 arrows and then just use them. You can't really do that the same way in this game. So because of that, you're going to have to use melee, but the bow is a really fun one if you want to use the bow. You know, it's got the bow, starts off with it. It's pretty fun to use in that way. And the armor's like medium to light. And then the Exiled Stalker. This one's a weird one. It starts in medium armor, but if you take the gloves off, then you're light armor. So I'd recommend just taking the gloves off right out of the gate. And this one starts with dual-wielding daggers, and it's got throwing knives. And this one's all agility, and this one takes a ton of skill, because this one you have to dodge, you have to, like, I don't know, you just have to know. In order to use fist weapons in a Souls-like game, you gotta have some kind of experience in them. Like, if you just go and have no idea what you're doing, you might just get destroyed on this one, because blocking's not going to be as good then, and you gotta get point blank on enemies to be able to hit them, because the range of the daggers is so low. Now, again, you can change out these daggers with a giant war maul later on and spec all strength as you level up, so you aren't stuck to this. But as a starting point, it does a ton of damage. Crazy amount of damage. But it's squishy and not very survivable, so if you mess up, you know, can get punished pretty easily with it. But it is very, very fun to use the dual-wielding daggers. I tested it out, and it was very, very fun to use dual-wielding daggers. Then after that, we have the Orion Preacher, and this one is, again, the Holy class, and you start off with a spell that is amazing. So, like, this is another great noob class, because you have spell casting and you have this, like, holy, like, needle. I don't know what to call it. I have a name. And it just, like, throws this little lightning spike at the enemies. And it doesn't even use that much mana. Mana goes really far on this game. So you can use this class, and whenever you're in any trouble at all, you can start throwing holy lights at enemies, and they'll actually last for a lot more shots than the arrows. The mana stones in this game are actually really common. Like, on my main save where I'm not a magic user, I only played for like 4 or 5 hours, and I already had like 30 to 40 of the mana stones. Maybe I was lucky, but I had a ton of mana stones. So getting mana regen is actually pretty easy, even though it's with consumables. So you can pretty easily just keep using those. And then also the maul that they start with, the Warhammer or whatever, it does a crazy amount of damage in the beginning. So, and later on, you could buff it and things, or, you know, get a different weapon later if you want. But the starting weapon with this one scales off of faith and strength, I think it was. So, you know, right out of the gate, it's already doing crazy damage. So it's a great starting class to just do a ton of damage early and be able to keep a safe distance. So this and the Morstead Infantry are best, like, noob classes, in my opinion. And then after that, we have the Pyrrhic Cultist. Now, this one was a little weird because you start the staff, and the staff kind of sucks. The range on the staff's amazing. You can hit someone with a melee, like, as far away as the spear, basically, or further. But it doesn't do a lot of damage. The spear does not do very much damage. And then you start with the ability to cast a fireball, and it does okay damage. I feel like it does less damage than the Preachers or the Holy, you know, classes spell. But you have a spell you can throw in order to kill things. So you can do that to keep some distance. And you'll definitely want to replace that staff with something else. You'll find weapons all throughout the beginning of the game. Like, you get them so fast. You'll just get tons. You'll find one you'll put someone on that you see scales off of Inferno or something, and then change out weapons. I would highly recommend it. The staff's really bad, and it's so slow that you'll leave yourself vulnerable, and then with how squishy you are, since you have light armor and stuff, you can definitely get punished with the class. And the other thing that was weird was that starting fireball spell, it has like an arc to it, so if the enemy moves towards you at all, it just goes over their head most of the time. So that's what's really weird about it. But if you're gonna go with fire spells, because later on there's other fire spells, so if you want to start off, you know, in that direction, then you'll play this and you'll suffer through the early game where they're not very good, and then later on you'll get some you know, better spells hopefully and better weapons and stuff, and then it's good. So this one's more about setting you off on the right foot towards becoming an Inferno mage, more so than being super strong early game. It's really kind of bad early game, honestly. And then we have the Condemned. Now this one is actually really interesting. So the Condemned starts with buckets, and the buckets are actually surprisingly OP as hell. Like, I was surprised by it because I played Condemned as my main class, because if you are sprinting and you do a light attack, it'll do this spin to win attack that hits like 4 times, and you can use it even when you only have like 1 stamina. So you can just sprint and use it, and then spin, and then back off, and then sprint and use it and spin, even though you have no stamina. And you can keep doing this crazy combo attack. Although the combo attack leaves you vulnerable. There's also a drop kick, and other than that, it's just, you know, Castus. It's basically fist weapons. But they're surprisingly not bad. You have a stone that you can throw. You're throwing stones, and you can throw a few of them. And they don't do very much damage, but you can do them just to throw and distract enemies, or, you know, finish an enemy's 1 HP without getting close or something. And then other than that, they just start with some basic ass medium armor and the ability to heal like everyone else, and start level 1. Now this one's really, really good if you are experienced with Souls games, but you aren't quite sure which way you want to build or don't know what you want to do. This is a great option because those first 10 levels, which are going to be the easiest levels to get, they use the least amount of experience. Those first 10 levels are all yours to get then, and then to level up your stats any way you want once you decide how you want to do it. And one of the best ways to do this, if you don't know what you want to do, you take a Condemned character, and as you level, you just level up Vitality until the soft cap of, I think it was 30 or something. You get 15 HP per level of Vitality, and then at a certain point, it starts giving you 10. I forget what that is, I think it's 30 or something. At that point, you'd stop living Vitality, and then if you still don't know what you want to do, you start leveling Endurance some until you decide what you want to do. Do you want to be Strength, Agility? Do you want to be a Mage? Whatever. So it's a great starting point if you are experienced with Souls-like games but don't know which way you want to build it yet in this game. And then there's also a Dark Crusader class, which I don't have. I'm on like a test version of the game because I got the early access, and it didn't come with the Dark Crusader class. But from looking at some stuff online, it was like it starts the highest level 14. It's a melee class. I don't really know a whole lot about it. But if you get the deluxe edition, you may just want to pick it just because you paid money for it, to be honest with you. Like, I probably would, just because I literally paid money to be able to play it. So I don't really have a lot about that one, unfortunately, but it looks like a strong melee class, so still kind of noob friendly in that way, and I just don't have a lot more information about it. But that's the classes, guys. I hope this video helped you out. I just want to make a video to help explain to you the different classes in this game, so before you get started, before you play the game, you can watch this hopefully and then know what class to pick, or why you'd want to pick it, or which way you want to build. You know, because it's really, none of these classes matter past level 10 or 20 or 30 or whatever, because you can build it out any way you want. By level 100, you could put, you know, 90 points into strength or something, whatever you want to do. So it's not set in stone. This is purely to set you off on the right foot based on what strategy you want, or what play style you want, or which way you want to enjoy the game. But hopefully it helped you out, guys. That's each of the classes. That's the rundown of each one, everything you need to know about them. Hopefully now you have a better idea of which class you want to play in Lords of the Fallen.